Hi, I'm Phil Ashey from the American Anglican Council with your weekly Anglican perspective. We're doing a series called Questions for Global Anglicans in the 21st Century. And we've been talking about false teaching and ended last week with false teaching in the church, and is there any way that we can stop this false teaching? Another way of saying it is, where is discipline? And you remember we actually began this series noting that there isn't any discipline right now in the Anglican Communion at the global level to stop this kind of false teaching. As a matter of fact, archbishops of Canterbury have been positively allergic to any kind of idea of discipline that says no to anything. Well, you know, that's really unbiblical, isn't it? I mean, Jesus talked about discipline in the church in Matthew 18, where he says, if your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you've won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Jesus himself said, look, if personal appeals don't work, if establishing the problem with 2 or 3 witnesses doesn't work, then take it before the whole church. And if the person still won't listen and continues to move on, then expel them. Treat them like a pagan or a tax collector. Paul said the same thing in his letter to Titus at chapter 3, verse 10. He said, warn a divisive person once, and then warn him a second time. After that, have nothing to do with them. And then to the Corinthians, who were involved in the very things that are consuming the Anglican Communion today, issues around human sexuality and specifically sexual immorality, this is what he said in chapter 5, beginning at verse 9. I've written to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the people of this world who are immoral, or the greedy and swindlers or idolatries. In that case, you'd have to leave the world. So he isn't saying, you know, don't even rub shoulders with sexually loose people. Of course not. We've got to share the gospel with everybody. He says, but now I'm writing you that you must not associate with anyone who calls himself a brother, but is sexually immoral or greedy, an idolater or a slanderer or a drunkard or a swindler. With such a man do not even eat. What's he saying? He's saying it doesn't matter if your leaders say, well, I'm a brother and a sister of yours in Christ. If they're engaged in active sexual immorality or promoting that, you shouldn't even eat with them. So why are bishops planning to go to Lambeth 2020? Question mark. He goes on and says, what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked man from among you. Expel. Be done with it. Don't have anything to do with it. Don't eat with them. Don't argue with them. Don't teach with them. Don't occupy the same stand as them. Well, you know, the Anglican Communion actually had an opportunity during the Anglican covenant process to take up a proposal in a book written called To Mend the Net about what discipline actually looks like. And that's the question, is what does church discipline then look like? We heard what the Bible said, and in a book that I wrote on the Anglican Communion, called Anglican Conciliarism, I quote what these wise primates said in their book. What would that actually look like? What it would look like is this: juridical authority, not just moral, to request innovators to refrain from further facts on the ground in the face of objections from other provinces, to issue godly admonitions to innovating provinces, those that are promoting false teaching, to reduce continuing innovating provinces that are engaged in false teaching to observer status within the Anglican Communion, and to reorder and even provide for the formation of a new province in the case of churches that continue to innovate and willfully ignore those godly admonitions. Someone has said, well, the Archbishop of Canterbury doesn't have authority to do that, neither do the primates. Well, actually, the Archbishop of Canterbury does have that authority. He has the authority to invite people to the Lambeth conferences. With that authority is the authority to disinvite them. And all bishops are involved in false teaching. And the primates could join him, particularly if they had the courage to issue those godly admonitions. Right now, I'm meeting with archbishops, bishops, clergy, and theologians in the global south. Right now, we're talking about restoring exactly this kind of discipline to the structures of the global Anglican Communion. So stay tuned.